Hello, Wang Qingyun was born in 1956 in Changchun City, Jilin Province. She had two older sisters, a younger sister, and a younger brother. Coming from a large family, their living conditions were poor. The entire household relied solely on her father's meager income to survive. Watching her father grow weaker each day, Qingyun felt deeply distressed. She often helped her family with whatever she could. One day, while out collecting firewood, she accidentally slipped down a slope. Her leg went numb, and the pain was so intense that she screamed for help. Fortunately, a friend who had accompanied her quickly ran back to inform her family, and she was taken to the hospital in time. However, due to financial difficulties, she did not receive proper treatment. Her leg was only given basic medical attention before she was sent home to recover on her own. As a result, her condition worsened over time, leading to a permanent disability. As she grew up, Qingyun followed the typical path of many other women. She got married and had children. Despite their continued struggles with poverty, she had a loving husband who cared for her deeply, which gave her hope in life. Unfortunately, this happiness did not last long. When her daughter turned 18, Qingyun's husband passed away due to illness, leaving her with the entire burden of the family. With no source of income, Qingyun was forced to find work. However, because of her disability, many employers rejected her. Eventually, she managed to secure a job as a cleaner. But her busy work schedule meant she had little time to care for her daughter, Sun Jiayue, who gradually became rebellious. Almost every day, Jiayue would skip school to spend time at internet cafes playing online games. After multiple warnings that yielded no results, the school finally decided to expel Jiayue. Now completely unsupervised, she became even more reckless. Not only did she chat with strangers online, but she also secretly traveled to Wuhan to live with a boyfriend she had met on the internet. When Qingyun found out, she was so furious that she fell seriously ill. However, her daughter remained firm in her decision and refused to return home. Eventually, Qingyun had no choice but to accept reality. She thought that if her daughter could find a stable place to settle down early on, it might not be such a bad thing. At the very least, she wouldn't have to suffer from poverty at home. From that point on, Qingyun lived alone. Looking at the empty house, she felt a deep sense of loneliness. Whenever she missed her daughter, she would talk to her through video calls. One day, while on a call with Jiayue, she noticed an injury on her daughter's face. It wasn't until later that she learned Jiayue had been abused by her boyfriend. That very afternoon, Qingyun immediately bought a bus ticket and set off for Wuhan. She had always believed her daughter was living a happy life, but when she finally saw her, she was heartbroken. Not only had Jiayu lost weight, but her mental state was also severely deteriorated. At that moment, Qingyun felt like a completely incompetent mother. What angered her even more was the discovery that Jiayue had become addicted to drugs. Worse still, after probing deeper, Qingyun learned that her daughter's boyfriend, Wang Hongliang, had a history of drug-related offenses. He had previously been sentenced for illegal drug possession, but had not changed his ways even after being released from prison. Upon arriving in Wuhan, he resumed his drug trafficking operations. He met Jiayue online and lured her in with sweet words, convincing her to move to Wuhan. At first, he treated her well, showering her with affection and care. However, as time passed, his interest in her faded, and he began neglecting her. Stranded in a foreign city, Jiayu felt abandoned. With no one to rely on, she eventually fell into drug addiction. She relied on Wang Hongliang to supply her with drugs to satisfy her cravings. Of course, the drugs weren't free. Wang demanded that Jiayue pay with her body, otherwise he would beat her. Seeing her daughter so frail and helpless, Qingyun was devastated. She decided to take Jiayue back home, hoping to help her overcome her addiction. However, Qingyun herself was in poor health and had no job. They constantly struggled with financial difficulties. In a moment of despair, looking for a way to numb her emotions, Qingyun tried taking a few puffs of the drugs her daughter was using. She never imagined that those few attempts would pull her into a dark abyss she could never escape. The turning point. To afford more drugs, Qingyun even sold her own house. Despite multiple attempts to quit, she repeatedly failed. At times, she contemplated suicide, but the thought of leaving her daughter alone in the world always stopped her. In her desperation, a new idea crossed her mind. What if she became a drug dealer herself? That way, she wouldn't have to worry about money to buy drugs and could even make some profit. She then reached out to Wang Hongliang, her daughter's ex-boyfriend, and embarked on the path of drug trafficking. Qing Yun was meticulous in her operations. She researched online for secret transportation routes and personally handled all transactions to minimize risks. She never entrusted others with drug deliveries. To further ensure security, she rented multiple houses across Changchun City, using them as stash spots. Each shipment was carefully hidden in different locations, and whenever a customer came to pick up goods, Qing Yun would instruct her daughter or a trusted associate to complete the transaction, ensuring she never appeared in person. To avoid drawing police attention, she implemented strict self-imposed rules, no matter how familiar a client was. She never sold large quantities in a single transaction. This cautious approach allowed her to operate smoothly for many years. Her drug business reflected both the precision of a calculated mind and the recklessness of someone who had lost control of her life. As we all know, prolonged drug use often leads to erratic behavior, and Qing Yun was no exception. Even at 54 years old, she maintained relationships with over 10 young men who catered to her desires. Among them, her favorite was a young man named Bai Jin. At just 23 years old, Bai Jin was tall, handsome, and came from a well-off family. Under normal circumstances, he would have never ended up as the lover of a woman old enough to be his mother, especially since Qing Yun's appearance was rather ordinary. However, fate often takes unexpected turns. Bai Jin had fallen into drug addiction. After his family discovered this, they completely cut off his financial support. Left with no money, the unbearable withdrawal symptoms made it nearly impossible for him to continue using drugs. That was when he met Qing Yun, a drug dealer. Having lived in loneliness for years, Qing Yun was instantly attracted to Bai Jin. Learning about his predicament, she was overjoyed. She made him an irresistible offer. If he agreed to stay by her side, she would supply him with unlimited drugs for free. Not only that, but she would also give him money for his personal expenses. Although such a demand was difficult for a 20-year-old man to accept, the cravings from his addiction made it unbearable. After much deliberation, Bai Jin finally agreed. From that moment on, he became Wang Qingyun's kept man. Every time she touched him, he felt nauseous, especially when he was sober. Many times he wanted to leave her, but whenever withdrawal symptoms kicked in, he had no choice but to return. Qing Yun understood his thoughts well. Every time he tried to leave, she had her own ways of punishing him. Once, when an exceptionally beautiful woman came to buy drugs, Bai Jin stole a few glances at her. Qing Yun immediately ordered him to have sex with her right in front of the woman. What was even more terrifying was that after it was over, Qing Yun demanded that Bai Jin, the woman, and another man named Xiao Jiang all have fun together. This lifestyle continued for more than 6 months until Qing Yun met another young man named Zhao. Only then did Bai Jin's situation slightly improve. Aside from the dozen or so young men who satisfied her physical needs, Qing Yun also maintained relationships with various drug addicts. Those who couldn't afford drugs often visited her stash houses to get high for free. However, the condition was that they had to spend the night with her. As a result, there was always a group of men lingering around her places. Thanks to these men, Qing Yun's drug business flourished, and she got everything she desired. However, as her operations expanded, rivals began to grow jealous. They sought ways to sabotage her. Some stole her shipments, while others reported her to the police. Unable to tolerate the harassment, Wang Qingyun decided to strengthen her own power. She recruited a group of recently released ex-convicts and formed a gang to protect her drug trafficking routes. With their assistance, her business became even smoother. Within just 2 years, she had risen to become the most powerful drug lord in the region. The underworld even gave her a notorious title, the Drug Queen. The reason was simple. Qing Yun had access to all kinds of drugs. Whether it was powder, pills, or any other form, she could provide it. With such a diverse inventory, She expanded her business to Wuhan, Tianjin, Changchun, and several other cities. She wasn't just running the trade herself, she even pulled her own daughter, Sun Jiayue, into the business. Though Jiayue had already become frail from drug addiction, she remained determined to follow her mother's footsteps. Qingyun entrusted her daughter with private tasks such as collecting and distributing shipments. The process was methodical. Qingyun and her new lover Zhao would fly to Wuhan to pick up the drugs. Once they secured the goods, they would take a long-distance bus back to Changchun. At a rented apartment, Qingyun would divide the drugs into smaller portions before handing them over to Jiayu, who would then make deliveries to designated locations. This method had worked for many years. However, at around 10 a.m. on April 10th, a young woman named Chen Danfeng from Jilin province, introduced by a friend, arrived at one of Qingyun's stash houses to purchase drugs. Everything seemed to go smoothly, but the moment she stepped out of the building, she was surrounded by police. In reality, as early as 2009, law enforcement had received anonymous tips about Qingyun and her daughter's long-term drug trafficking operations in Changchun. Immediately, the police launched a secret investigation, which lasted over 5 months. Eventually, they gathered enough evidence to take them down. The authorities split into 2 teams. One followed Qingyun to Wuhan to track down and apprehend her drug supplier, while the other stayed behind in Changchun to monitor and arrest Qingyun and her associates. That day, officers had been waiting outside Wang Qingyun's residence for hours. As soon as Chen Danfeng appeared, they moved in and arrested her. From her possession, they seized 10.46 grams of meth and 12 ecstasy pills. With concrete evidence, the investigators stormed the apartment where Qingyun and her daughter were using drugs. Inside, they found 26.38 grams of meth and 125 ecstasy pills. Zhao, who was keeping watch outside, was also caught. When police searched his backpack, they discovered 205 grams of meth and a staggering 1,431 ecstasy pills. After Wang Qingyun was taken into custody, the Changchun police immediately notified their counterparts in Wuhan. The Wuhan officers did not disappoint. With the assistance of local authorities, they successfully captured Wang Hongliang, the man supplying Qingyun with drugs. At his residence, they seized 3,184 ecstasy pills, 11.75 grams of meth, and 53.9 grams of an unidentified white powder. One particularly disturbing discovery at Qingyun's apartment left the police in shock. When they stormed in, they found her inside a room with over 10 young men, all in good physical shape. Initially, officers assumed they were her bodyguards. However, upon questioning, they realized these men were not there for protection. They were her companions. Investigators soon learned that all of these young men were drug addicts. If they wanted free access to drugs, they had to sleep with IR. Qingyun. In an attempt to justify her actions, Qingyun proudly compared herself to Empress Wu Zetian, claiming she was merely keeping young lovers like the ancient ruler. Hearing this, the police exchanged bewildered glances, struggling to process what they had just witnessed. But the shocking events didn't stop there. Sun Jiayue's behavior upon arrest was even more appalling than her mother's. After locating Jiayue, police followed her to a bathhouse. They spent nearly an entire day staking out the location before finally apprehending her. What happened next was beyond comprehension. Jiayu, in an act of sheer desperation, attempted to seduce the officers. She naively believed that her beauty could help her negotiate a lighter sentence. The dark side of the case. In the end, the police seized a total of 4,652 ecstasy pills, 253.6 grams of methamphetamine, 53.9 grams of black powder, 2 vehicles involved in drug trafficking, and 260,000 yuan in drug money. During the interrogation, Wang Qingyun tried to justify herself. She admitted that she knew drug trafficking was illegal, but she claimed she had no other choice due to her desperate circumstances. Qingyun insisted that she was forced into this path by her situation. She had many siblings, yet none of them ever offered to help her. In fact, she claimed that not a single one of them had ever given her even 100 yuan. She said she had tried to find a job, but due to her poor health, no one would even hire her as a nanny. In her statement, she described how, after experiencing the cold indifference of the world, she finally decided to take this route. What was truly sad was that, after choosing this path, Qingyun not only felt no remorse but even found enjoyment in it. She admitted that using drugs not only brought her money but also helped relieve the pain in her body. Even while in prison, Qingyun appeared cheerful. She confessed that in the past, she had always been alone at home, with no one to talk to. But now, in the detention center, she shared a space with 20 other inmates. The liveliness of the place made her feel less lonely. To someone who had spent years in isolation, this environment felt like paradise. One can only wonder how Sun Jiayu must have felt upon hearing these words from her mother. In the past, after losing her father's love, she had longed for affection from others. However, in her pursuit of external validation, she neglected her mother's emotions. After losing her husband and watching her daughter leave home, Qingyun also sank into despair. Left alone in an empty house, it was inevitable that her mental state would deteriorate. Perhaps everything in life happens for a reason. Yet, no matter the circumstances, breaking the law is never justified. There were always other paths she could have taken. It was Jiayu's downfall that led her mother down this irreversible path of crime. In the end, their fates were sealed, and their punishment was deserved. However, many people still sympathized with their tragic and turbulent lives. And you, what do you think of this infamous mother-daughter duo?